All right, we'll go ahead and get started, and appreciate everyone joining both in person and online. It's really nice to be back. We were talking earlier to be back and like to see people that you haven't actually seen in 2 years, or actually meet people in person. So this is so nice. For those that don't know, I'm Drayton Wade. I'm president of the Clemson Balkans Foundation, and I was a 2013 poli-sci grad, and really appreciate each of you being here tonight for our 4th installment in the Global Politics Speaker Series. We started this about a year ago to bring wonderful leaders in business and politics who are engaged in interesting topics to come and share some of their experience and to help talk about some of the challenges we're seeing in the world today. With that in mind, tonight we have a really interesting group of 2 speakers, not just one, that I think will have some really wonderful conversation. I'll get into their introductions here in just 1 second. But before we get in, just a few kind of general housekeeping rules and announcements. This is being recorded, just so everyone is aware, and we'll try to upload this later to YouTube and Spotify so you can share with people that weren't here tonight. And we also have a Q&A, but just hold those questions till later on. So we'll do that towards the end. If you're on Zoom, you can put your questions in the chat, and Bubba or myself will make sure that the speakers get that towards the end. Additionally, really just want to say thanks to a lot of people for helping to put this on, both in person and online. First, thanks to the Political Science Department and Dr. Peak for always helping support us with these different events. Thanks to the Clemson Diplomacy Club. These events really are a lot of different organizations at Clemson coming together to provide these. And so the Clemson Diplomacy Club, the Honors College, the board members of the Clemson Balkans Foundation. And I also wanted to do 2 special thank yous. One to Raleigh Adams, our intern of the poli-sci department, who has done all the communications, a lot of the hard work on this. And the other to a true Clemson legend, Bubba Britton of the Clemson Alumni Association, who really goes above and beyond and is very kind and generous with helping us set all of this up. With that in mind, I do want to get into introducing our guests tonight. And like I mentioned, we have 2 really interesting people with very interesting backgrounds. The first is Dr. Ronald Scott Pyle of Myrtle Beach. He had 3 kids actually come through Clemson, which I just learned earlier. So he's a big Clemson fan. Scott is the founder of Pyle Financial Services. He has over 30 years of experience in high-end wealth management. And in 2013, through a series of events, Scott left a major Wall Street firm to found his own firm. Since then, his primary focus is on discerning the strategic macroeconomic environment, engaging with national relationships, and growing our impact across the country as well. He was appointed by Fortune magazine top leadership guru to the John Maxwell Foundation as senior advisor, and shares a vision with John Maxwell to help provide transformational experiences to people, groups, and families across the world that align with his work at Africa New Life in Rwanda. And Rwanda is the way I should be saying that. And I know Scott will talk more about that in a minute. He and his wife, Dr. Pamela Pyle, have spent over 10 years in Rwanda and reside in Myrtle Beach. Our second speaker, who I've known several years and was become a very close friend as well, is Jay Hein. Jay is the president of the Sagamore Institute, which is a think tank he co-founded in 2004 with U.S. Senator Dan Coates. He is also managing director of the Commonwealth Impact Foundation. Together, these entities move game-changing ideas into action through innovations and impact investments. Previously, Jay served as deputy assistant to President George W. Bush and the director of the White House Office of Faith-Based Initiatives. He was a senior advisor to the president and oversaw the implementation of a determined attack on need. Along with this, he formerly directed civil society programs at the Hudson Institute and served as a welfare policy advisor to Wisconsin Governor Tommy Thompson. And lastly, our moderator for the night is Megan Hart. Megan is a sophomore political science major and economics minor. And has several interesting roles as well. She is the events coordinator for the Diplomacy Club and a data analytics intern, I believe, with the Clemson football team, which I can only imagine what that involves. So with all that in mind, if you would just help me in welcoming our speakers tonight, and we'll turn it over to them.
Robert, with you, I'd like to jump right in. Investing can be described in a variety of ways. How would you define it from your perspective in it? Jay, if we could begin with you, that would be great.
Sure. Well, I would say that, how are we doing on volume, by the way?
So far, so good.
For the online audience, good. Well, let me first actually thank Drayton for the invitation and the Clemson community for welcoming us so warmly and showing off this beautiful campus. It is everything that I've heard advertised, both in its physical beauty and hospitality. So it's a real delight to be here. Thank you for serving as moderator and for passion you bring to the mission of this endeavor. So super grateful for the opportunity to be with you. I would say that impact investing is the fastest growing financial service that no one really understands its components. And the reason I say that is there's not a rigor yet built around a discipline, a financial discipline that seeks to correlate a direct financial investment in a private company that produces social value. If you're an investor and a good one, you become very good at pattern recognition, whether it's in technology or some other industry. You see 1,000 deals and you just learn how to reduce risk, how to enhance profit, how to operate with excellence. So a pattern forms in your mind about the economics of such businesses and about the operations, the excellence of the operator. Impact investing doesn't have a pattern because there's a bifurcated pattern in our minds that we try to make as much money as we can. The benevolent among our society try to make as much as they possibly can so that they can give away as much as they can. So they have patterns for those two sides of the equation. But impact investing is asking that equation to be problem solved in the same sequence. And so I think the maybe charitable way to put it is venture capital in 1980 was in the same situation. It was a very new financial discipline that needed to have a rigor and a set of pattern recognition built around it. And that's our opportunity with impact investing. However, the field, I said it's the fastest growing financial service that's poorly understood or lacks consensus on what it means or what success looks like really. While the rigor hasn't caught up yet, some estimates show somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 in $5 invested on the planet is in some type of socially redeeming fund or investment. So it's a monster part of the market. We just need to catch up with the rigor so that we can achieve its promise, which is to invest in companies that are solving some of the world's biggest problems and sustaining those solutions through the economics that the private sector offers.
Thank you for that explanation.
I obviously echo what Jay said, and thank you, Drayton, everyone, for being here. I want to cast it this way. I think many of us are charitable and want to give and help. So I think there's a posture conversation we can look at when we talk about impact investing. And so maybe recalibrate our mind a little bit around, instead of giving money away, invest money away. So imagine if I came to you for a business idea, which a lot of our charitable institutions might approach a new donor, say, I'd like you to give $10,000 this year because I want to go start something. But next year, in order to keep it going, I'm going to come get another 10,000 from you because you're now on my donor list, and I need to keep that 10,000 coming in every year to keep my endeavor going. We would never invest that way, would we? You know, I want to invest money. You go start the business, build the widget, and then return my money and make money on top of that. So maybe if we just recast our thinking a little bit and our posture, and what if we start to take our charitable dollars or money that we're giving with a specific purpose, or what we would call in the investment industry a return on investment. But maybe your return on investment is creating so many jobs in a community, and you measure the return on investment by the jobs, but in order for it to be an investment, it has to become self-sustaining. So we recalibrate our charitable dollars into investable dollars, because we saw what happened during COVID. You take the developed world out of the giving schedule, and the emerging world suffered the most from the COVID, because we all shut down and then paid ourselves to stay home. But what happened to all the giving dollars around the globe? Well, they shrunk quickly, and then those people aren't recovering. So we need to think about our giving like we do our investing. And so that's kind of how I wanted to cast the thinking, or our posture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to applications of impact investing and redevelopment efforts, I understand that you both have experience in development and need-based efforts. Scott, what if I specifically helped to establish the Dream Medical Center in Rwanda? What case in working in a country that was overcoming genocide?
I will say first, Rwanda is a success story for the world. We all know the movie Hotel Rwanda, but it's kind of like Paul Harvey. Remember Paul Harvey? We need to tune in for the rest of the story. Rwanda now is the second fastest growing economy in the continent of Africa, the 5th safest country to walk down the street at night, and was just recognized as one of the cleanest countries on the planet because they close every Saturday. The whole country shuts down from 8 a.m. till noon. Even the president goes out and they clean the streets, pick up trash, paint the curbs, and it is just an amazing bonding experience. So I found Rwanda to be a very easy place to go in and be a part of transformation and value-based investing, impact investing. The hardest thing was convincing the organization we were working for that we were going to build. At first was a clinic, and then it became kind of a clinic, outpatient treatment center, and it emerged into the largest, most state-of-the-art private hospital in the country. And that was more of an evolution and difficulty with the organization to kind of step out of their comfort zone and take on such a challenge. And now that hospital, initially we had two surgical theaters in it. We just had to build our 3rd surgical theater because it's so busy. And we have a pediatric, dental, and ortho. And it was the first hospital in the first country in Africa to receive American donated vaccines to be distributed to an African population. So it's really kudos to the leadership of Rwanda, and we got to come along and be a part of the process. It is incredible. Yeah, incredible country.
Moving over to you, I'm working with businesses in the West Bank. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I'd love to. Drayton and I are actually doing a project in Israel that maybe I could set up with a Rwanda story as well, because the ideas that we're practicing in the West Bank really emerged from our lessons learned from how Rwanda took Singapore's playbook and became the success story that Scott just mentioned. So when Paul Kagame became president, he was the general that led the army in the recapture of the country to reestablish democracy. And when he became president, he looked at his balance sheet, and 90% or 97% of his revenue was foreign aid. And he had an opportunity cost question, which is, does he get on an airplane and go to foreign capitals, every year to ask for renewal of foreign aid from Western economies, or does he get his own money? What does it take to create a tax base that generates replacement revenue? That's what Singapore did to emerge as a world-class economy based on two big ideas. One is you need money in your economy that you don't have, so you must figure out how to attract foreign direct investment. And then you need to do human capital development so that your population can win in the new jobs that are being created. And then maybe even in the next generation, create their own companies and their own and accelerate growth internal as a set of assets. But that needs to be learned, not only how to get dollars to come in, but how to get the talent to operate businesses. You need to come with those dollars. And so it was a phenomenal exercise of indigenous talent doing outreach to business people who thought it'd be pretty cool to help build a country. You know, they're not offered, that's not put on offer very, very often. And so there's a very inspiring group of leaders that I was friends with that were building banks and hospitals and all the infrastructure needed for an economy to scale. And so what we've seen in Rwanda is what I thought was a super powerful term 15, 20 years ago, and that was enterprise solutions to poverty. That's the only thing that has ever beat poverty in human history, enterprise. It's common sense at some level. But for the past 100 years, that's not how we've attacked poverty. We've attacked poverty through foreign aid, through welfare, and through philanthropy, not enterprise. And so it was, I thought, super inspiring, super instructive, super scalable, you know, to take these ideas into, and we'll land in the West Bank, but they're not there anymore. They're not talking about enterprise solutions to poverty because they're scaling their economy, as Scott said. They're now aspiring to be the first middle class economy on the continent of Africa. So now it's just about wealth creation and excelling in the marketplace. So super, super inspiring story, but also one that was very instructive, I think, for America's inner cities. Maybe we'll talk about that later because these are broken economies. Every major city has a zip code where life expectancy is probably 12, 15 years worse than another zip code in that same city. And you could talk about that as a social issue, talk about it as a health issue, spiritual issue, educational issue. It's an economic issue. And that brings us to the West Bank. So the West Bank, as you might know, is a very contentious region. The Israeli population is oftentimes referred to as settlers because this isn't under Israeli sovereignty. That's from a government standpoint. It is controlled by the Israeli military, but the Palestinians live there as well, and the relationships are not harmonious. And so there's a lot of terror activity, but there's more just impoverishment. I think gross domestic product and what's per capita income rate, is it like $2,000 or $3,000 a year? So, it's a broken economy.
It was like 40 or something like that, 30. So it's,
so modern Israel, Tel Aviv, coastal area is about $45,000. And then you can drive 50 miles and cross the Green Line and enter the West Bank, and per capita income goes down to $2,000 or $3,000. So now you could look at the West Bank and think Rwanda, this is an emerging economy, but what Rwanda didn't have is a modern economy right there, with capital and with talent. We had to bring that in from places like Chicago to Rwanda. But in the West Bank, there's a lot of talent there too. There's just so much conflict. But the traditional solution set for the past 30 years has been trading land for peace. And those peace accords that you've read about have achieved a cold peace. This is not friendly relations. It's just the absence of military conflict. But if you can help neighbors do business together and have enlightened self-interest, where what's good for you is good for me and good for this place, because we all want our kids to grow up in a better place than they have to right now, which is super insecure. You can create bonds of social capital, and that's what's happening among entrepreneurs, Israeli and Palestinian entrepreneurs. So we're bringing some of the techniques of foreign direct investment, entrepreneur support that we experienced in Rwanda. Impact investing becomes an attractive financial tool because those supplying capital would like to see their money back, would like to see some profit, but they have a big heart. Maybe they're Jewish and they have a direct connection to the land, or maybe they're otherwise faith motivated. By the way, as an aside, the West Bank is also known in the Bible as Judea and Samaria. So it's very rich biblical heritage. And so there's a lot of people thinking, wow, invest there, create a better environment, and participate in something that sort of fills my heart at the same time. Well, we're early innings, learning a lot, but getting traction.
Other entities in the redevelopment. How would you regard the involvement of government, organizations, and other groups in redevelopment?
You know, in any redevelopment, one of those entities could get in the way. And if they're competing, it's the prize of solving the problem, it becomes ineffective. And so when government and private industry can work together around a common goal, using common language, agreeing on what is the return on investment. As in Rhonda, we saw amazing benefits from that. And when you think about what Jay said about the ability to rebuild a country, being a part of the journey, our inner cities in many ways are small countries. They have their own rules and their own government and their own obstacles. But and Senator Tim Scott was involved in putting together legislation that would encourage capital to come into certain areas. So I think if the government can start to see private industry, and private industry can start to see government as partners in achieving the goal, it's a beautiful thing. I've had the privilege of being involved in Jekyll Island, Georgia, on a few projects. And Jekyll Island is a real interesting place. The state of Georgia owns Jekyll Island. And so the regulation is very simple. Follow these rules, and you come in and give us your presentation. And if it's good for the state of Georgia and Jekyll Island, it's approved. It's probably one of the best examples that I've seen in the US of private industry and government working together. And I think it's because Jekyll Island's the land is owned by the state of Georgia. So there's a different perspective. It's like they have skin in the game, and there's a profit return and an expectation on goals and needs and community. And so I'm not saying we want the government to own everything. I think, but what I'm saying is it's an example when the government sees the opportunity as a long-lasting benefit to the people, the community, and the government itself. But it's just about cooperation. I always get back into our posture. What is the government's posture towards the project, and what is private industry's posture towards the project? And if I see you broken, and this is a friend of mine, John Maxwell, if I see you broken, I may want to fix you. If I see you hungry, I may want to feed you. Think about that. If I'm not careful, there's this well, you're broken, I'm going to help you. And so, but if I see you as valuable, I'll serve. And I think in our society, even our institutions have lost their posture or their perspective on valuing one another. And if we can get back to that, I see great things for us in our cities. Thank you.
Reflecting on your role as deputy assistant in these needs-based efforts in
Thank you. So I was humbled to serve President Bush from 2006 to 2008 as director of the faith-based initiative, is how it's commonly referred to. But as Drayton said in the bio, the president saw it as a determined attack on need. And when he cast vision for the office, he was going after some of the themes, Megan, that you just teed up. Because as a candidate in 1999, when he was running for the office, he said, if I'm elected, and we see human need, we're going to declare it unacceptable. Our neighbors, shouldn't have to live, and then you can just fill in your own list of the things where you see brokenness in our society. But we're not going to look first to government to solve it, because the big and the impersonal that is government can do some things. It can create some order on the streets, and it can transfer assets and in certain situations, but it can't love, and it can't transform. That happens in relationship. And so we have something in America known as the nonprofit sector. I know you have a center on philanthropy on campus. And so it was my job to think through really the market dynamics of your question, Megan, which is the nonprofit sector in America is big business and bad business. So we give as Americans more than $1 billion a day. If you knew that, it's about $400 billion. And nonprofit organizations create roughly 1 in 10 jobs in the American economy. So that's how that money is spent. So that's a big business. Those are big dollar flows. That's a lot of employment. It's a lot of service that comes from it. But it's bad business because it operates in an irrational exchange. And Scott was addressing this earlier. We have givers motivated by what motivates them, which is very unique and particular. And we have nonprofits trying to attract those dollars in a disconnected way from product and service, whereas you're either going to buy Coke or Pepsi, and we're going to know which your preferences are. But why did you give that dollar? It isn't necessarily what's happening inside this organization. So this guy's man or woman is doing their job, and then in an uncorrelated way, trying to go get off their job and go attract money. And so there's just super high frustration between the donors that think they're just giving to the same thing year after year, black hole, where's my ROI? And the nonprofit saying, really, Drayton, $1,000? Like, I know, and they're like, can't you give me more? Look how hard I'm working. And so we work very hard in that office to be able to think through how we strengthen those organizations as businesses. And we consider questions like Senator Scott is doing to think about not only government capital, but more so private capital as social investment. And so what could be deemed performance philanthropy, or could be, has an outcomes orientation, or social impact bonds, which brings government and private dollars together, or now just straight up, impact investing as private capital to private companies to solve big problems. We need it all. There's a pluralism that we need. So we address those questions. And what we felt, to answer your question even more directly, is people are going to listen to the President of the United States, popular, unpopular. When he talks, the world's going to respond. And so for him to lift up our neighbors in need is super valuable. To say we're going to pay attention to what's broken and what needs to be changed. And we're going to lift up these oftentimes hidden faith-based and community organizations that are the healers and that are really the hidden heroes. And to be able to use a White House platform to give them the stage was really inspiring. We count that in the highlight for sure.
Touching on what you
Sure, my personal values.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was motivated to get into the business that I'm in, which has alternated between government and think tank life now, impact investing, because of my faith. And I saw when my faith became very real for me in high school, I thought I was a good golfer in northern Wisconsin, which is a very short season. So I thought I'll play golf until I can't beat people, which might not be very long. And then I'll school and seminary and serve, because I didn't have a role model beyond traditional church service, which would have been great. I think I would have loved that. But I got a different calling, is the language I would use, into public service. I read the story of William Wilberforce in England, who used his seat in Parliament to end the slave trade and other causes. And I thought, wow, you can live out your faith in a different domain outside the church, but it's really actually the church. It's the the faithful going on mission. And so I thought that I had a lot of interest and passion in public policy. And so to be able to do that for, according to the value system that I was trying to live my life by, and to actually be a part of, helping people in direct service was very inspiring and rewarding.
Undergraduates. Purpose going into your interest, and yours is in public policy. So,
Sure.
moving over to you, Scott. Your values incorporated into your involvement in Rhonda and establishing.
First of my value was I valued my wife and loved her, and she had been really on a trip to Rhonda, her first trip there, and determined this was her place and this was her purpose, and came home without a plane full of children, which I was very thankful of. We have enough children, paid enough Clemson tuition as it is. But she was determined to get me back there. So I'm not sure my values came other than valuing her in my marriage, right? And so I went a little begrudgingly, actually, kind of thinking, well, we have so many people here that need help. Okay, honey, I'll go. And then as I had the privilege of seeing an entire new culture, an entire new country, and there is something that touched me about a people that had lived through the Hutu genocide perpetrated against the Tutsi in 1994, where identity politics had led to the slaughtering of 1 million people in 100 days. I mean, the population of 7 million. Just how do you come out of that? And so what I found out was they rebuilt the country on values. And the first thing was dignity. We need to restore human dignity. In Kinyarwanda, it's called agachira, dignity. And then they started to look at cause and effect. And they were no longer Hutu, Tutsi, or Twa. They were now Rwanda. No more dividing and classifying. We are one people, one country. And that was so compelling, and that was so attractive. But there's something deeper, and I still to this day believe it has to be from what they went through, the humility, the brokenness, but the determination and the courage, all in one people girding themselves up and taking on the future. And then they rebuilt the country through forgiveness and reconciliation. Now, I could go on and on about this, but I won't. But my goodness, they rebuilt their country on forgiveness of murder and reconciliation. We can't forgive each other for Facebook posts. So there is so much to learn from a country and the people who've been through the worst of humanity and now the best of humanity. So that if that doesn't stir your internal values, I don't know what. And that's why I was compelled and attracted to, and to this day, I can't wait every time I go to see the people I love. It's special. Special.
That sounds like a truly incredible process.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the lesson of forgiveness and reconciliation and real world pain in a level that I can't imagine. And then the kind of 3 great aims of their country, I would say, is to dream big, accountability. There would be no corruption tolerated at any level, and unity together with the basics of dignity. And I've seen that now played out. I have the privilege of serving with John Maxwell in countries all around the world. And a lot of people complain about our southern border. Well, what drives that problem? And we're involved in Guatemala, Costa Rica, Paraguay. And recently we were down in Paraguay, and it's such a similar story. The smallest country in that part of the earth, the planet. And we're down there, and over 700,000 Paraguayans have gone through the value-based leadership, and it's in the public schools. And John's created a curriculum, 3 years in all public schools, taught right alongside math, language, history, science, values. The president of Brazil had so many ripples from Paraguay affecting his country. He called John and our team and asked, would you stop by on the way home? So John meets with the president and the first lady, and they had the minister of education there, and they signed a government, I'm going to call it order or decree. And over the next 5 years, 51 million children in Brazil will be taught value-based leadership by John Maxwell in all the public schools. Imagine if our children were taught values alongside language, science, math, and history. I mean, it's just, so when you talk about applying your values, I've seen it over and over and over around the world. And now we're wanting to see that same transformation here.
You describe as the most prominent principles.
Well, I think that market behaves the way the participants want it to. You know, so we have an exchange between investors and companies, but also consumers and those providing services. And so values matter there. You know, that Drayton and I have a fun little parlor game about the question of, does all investment have impact? Because you could say at some level, sure, but all impact isn't the same. And what is, you know, this is where the humanities come in. You know, the humanities merging with the business school curriculum. What is good and what is true and what is beautiful? What is the good life? What is a good society? These are the big questions that need to be hammered out, that our leaders should be helping us think through, our leaders on campus, our leaders in society, rather than so much of the discourse, you know, that we're hearing today. So let's aspire for that. Let's encourage those who are thinking big. Senator Scott again is powerful on these themes, but you know, making, you know, economics is not a, you know, math. It's a social science, and to be able to enlarge our life skills as we practice in our economy is in many respects a values-based conversation. And so you're going to have values, and Scott's going to have values, and I'm going to have values. That's a very unique description, but we should learn from each other. And what if we had a competition for the good and the true and the beautiful? Now that's how you get to a good society. And, you know, we've experienced that, but that ebbs and flows, which brings me then to politics. You know, so you have the market on one side, but politics is also market-based competition. And it is participants, those in elective office, but also what our founders thought is that we were the most important agent, meaning the citizen. Citizen was put at the center of the American experiment. And our founders knew that to the degree our citizens were educated and engaged and even virtuous would be relatively how well we fared in this public, which is an open question because every generation has to renew it. So the values of what, you know, Smiling has got called for values-based education in our schools. We used to teach civics well. You know, the founders didn't have a lot of formal education. They just read all the best books from the Greeks and the Romans and understood how to order society. And we don't think deeply about the things that that we have in previous generations. If we did again, and this is just a commercial for Clemson and the good work that's happening here, is that we need to create better thinkers. And by creating better thinkers and rewarding nobility and sacrifice and community, I'm going to like the market that comes out of that. And so are you. And I'm going to like the politics that comes out of that. And so is you.
If I just jump in on that just a second, I don't think we appreciate the fact that we have margin in our life to just contemplate. And there's so many people around the world that are spending this moment just trying to get water, food, safety. We are in a society that gives us the freedom to first contemplate and then to negotiate and debate. I mean, the art of fun, debate and understand the pro and the con. And so first contemplate, negotiate, debate, and then we have the freedom to initiate. I didn't mean to rhyme those. That sounded pretty good. I'm glad you're recording this. But it's the simple part. And I think we forget maybe, or we act like it's hokey, or just to sit, listen to one another, and appreciate and understand. But your question is so good, Megan, when you talk about what does it mean to Jay, and he answered, and what does it mean to me? It was two completely different, but we're both right, because she wanted my opinion. She wanted my perspective, and I really appreciate that you're wanting from both. And so I just wanted to echo that, Jay, because I really pray we can get back to appreciating one another, our country.
You have 2 questions, or do you have more?
I am ready. I was about to wrap it up. Thank you again for both being here and speaking with me tonight. And as we were all speaking about having our young people coming, now we can open up for questions from the audience.
Yeah, so we don't have mics in the back. If you have a question here in the room, just speak loudly, and then people on Zoom, yeah, they'll go through chat.
Nice. Awesome. Hard ones, Scott.
I was going to say for Jay.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. I really appreciated it. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, Mr. Scott, was the linguistic importance of the term Rwanda versus Rwanda. And if you could speak to that a little bit, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny, we were teasing, I'm from Texas, kind of simply educated, and the fact that words have become so important to me. So I was going to meet the president of, at the time, Rwanda. And then I started to think, gosh, there's no O in R, it's RWA. And then I actually asked, how do Rwandans pronounce Rwanda? Well, they pronounce it Rwanda. So I thought, if I'm going to meet the president of the country, I should be able to pronounce his country appropriately out of respect. And then I started to kind of think, if it goes back to the movie, Hotel Rwanda, and we really need a new movie, The True Rwanda, because it is a story like nothing else. And so the other part that started to affect me a little bit is that, so we may believe it's okay to rename or mispronounce a country's name. I mean, how disrespectful, how inappropriate. So, that really started to, and that's for me. I mean, I'm not preaching, I'm saying for me, it just shook me about what it is to respect others and appreciate others and start to understand the world. And for a simple country boy, that was pretty big. And so I really appreciate that question because I promised the president that I'm on a journey to help appropriately tell the Western world it's Rhonda. So thank you.
To follow up on that question, have you seen other African countries paying attention to what Rwanda is doing, given the need, the depth of need in the continent?
Yeah, so I want to answer a little bit of that, but I know I want you to take it, and I'll.
Okay, yeah. Not only African nations, but it's the hot economic development play now, and in so much of the developing countries, from underperformers like Liberia saying, how did you do it? And Rwanda, giving them the playbook, like literally. And I was present in the exchange, and then you see how it worked and it won't work, because it comes down to leadership and talent and rigor and commitment. And Liberia's had a hard time executing on the playbook, which is literally bound and understood, just like Paul Kagame took from Singapore. But that's not the dramatic example. The dramatic example is South Africa. South Africa has been the beacon of Africa's economy for how long now? And they went through a bad spell of leadership recently, and started to really suffer economically for it. So companies started to move to Rwanda, and other ecosystem players started to move physically to Rwanda because there was more opportunity for them there in this hilly country that doesn't even have a railroad that gets to the water.
Landlocked.
Totally landlocked. Yeah, but good governance, business ingenuity, and smart capital. I mean, all that's on display in technology prowess. So one, Liberia is trying to replicate. Another, South Africa is trying to leverage and somehow resuscitate their own economy through this little experiment. But one other insight that I found fascinating is watching the Rwanda experience from the inside out, and we coming over as Americans, mispronouncing, as I'm struggling with here, the name, and we're talking about how our markets perform. They're looking at us saying, yeah, you're America, or you're the UK, or you're Switzerland. We're never going to be you. But Singapore, South Korea, like the Asian tigers, we can do that. So there needed to be an accessibility to the emerging market that looked like them, that had dynamics that were resonant with their dynamics. And so not only are countries looking to Rwanda, but they should, because they're the model, we aren't the model, unless you want to look at America in 1805, when we were trying to figure out the same thing, or 1880, because you need to be able to see what a broken economy looks like that becomes repaired.
Yeah, echo all that. And President Kagame is known. You speak to a citizen of another African country, and odds are they are going to know President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. And it is amazing, all those on the continent that are looking to them, as well as those around the world. And they're inspirational. The smallest geographic country on the continent is really leading the way. And so absolutely, other countries and people, there's such an admiration. And in the country, and I've been around when he's out in the village or with, and many of them call him father, like not as a religious symbol, right, but they believe there is a love from him, and he does love them like a father. The average age is, I believe, 28 years old. 75%, I think, a significant amount of Rwandans are under the age of 30.
And it's worth noting too, because we dug deep in the weeds on their narrative, that there is a constituency that is not impressed by his leadership, that is really burdened by the authoritarianism of his leadership. And you look at Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, and it's a very similar narrative too. And so I'll just speak for myself about how you process that. And I have met him, I admire him deeply. And what it takes to not allow corruption to take root is a very serious strength. And what does it take to be rigorous on, market strategies? So a strong leader is essential for a turnaround. And a strong leader also has qualities that not everybody is going to appreciate. And so I think we should embrace that complexity, and be clear-eyed about it and learn from it.
And as you say that, John Maxwell has a saying, everything rises and falls on leadership. And we've seen that. We've seen that in the African continent. We've seen it all around the world. Bad leader, bad outcome. Great leader in terms of the benevolent. And the other thing you think about, to take a society from that point to ultimately handing off true democracy to a generation of understanding what is democracy and understanding how to vote and how to not be swayed and to pass on this beautiful thing. Imagine how that would feel as a leader, the burden for the country. But you're right, not everybody, and ultimately there will be a new leader.
From the chat, it's this not specific to either, so let's all jump on whichever wants it. It seems to be a common theme that while many countries in the developing world may lack the first century infrastructure and lifestyle that we as Westerners hold to be a necessity for modern life, they make up for the physical lack of goods with a sense of love and appreciation of family and neighbor that is like no other. What personal stories can you point out that highlight this phenomenon?
Oh, goodness. One comes to mind of my wife and I and a dear friend, Tom Allen, at his place. And we were walking into the village up the top of this mountain, overlooking this beautiful lake. And I noticed he was carrying this like glass milk jug. And we're talking and walking and going on. And we'd gone down into the village, and there was this lady that when he would see her, he would bring her this, and I would call it like curdled, like bad milk. And it was her favorite thing. And then my wife, who's a doctor, sat down with her, and this woman was at least in her 80s. She didn't know how old she was. And I watched her, mostly blind, sit there and enjoy that milk, holding my wife's hand in just a fragile state, just as happy and telling life stories to my wife. She'd had just a touch to life. And then one other thing I will say, supporting a gentleman in another country, I'll just say that, for anonymity, and not an African country, I want to put it that way. And we were sending him off, and we were telling him from a significantly different culture, we'll be praying for you, and we're glad we could support you. And he turned around as he was laying and said, well, I'll continue to pray for your country as you drown in your excess. Wow. And it took me a while to not be offended. But it goes back to, we see a simplicity and a love and a joy. And we talked about values and faith. You see it, you do see that. And in the emerging world, as you see it in the developed world. But stuff is not what makes the human heart full.
Poverty, you see this in urban neighborhoods as well, that those who don't have a lot are oftentimes the quickest to give. And that dynamic, I think, comes from some utilitarianism, like, well, I have it today, and you really need it worse than I do, and if I help you, then you could probably help me if the situation reverses. And these are meager assets, but it's a dominant trait. And so, the more prosperity, the more self-sufficiency that we acquire, we think we need it less. And it's not true on a bunch of human levels, but it manifests so clearly. And then we think it's so impressive because the human dignity that's at the heart of that equation is powerful. So I just think it's a great question and we should process it more deeply. But I have one quick answer to it in a different direction. We work with some super talented scholars in Rwanda, and it's a scholarship program where they learn in the States or the UK or elsewhere and come back to participate in the economy. And one of the fastest growing economic innovations is in agriculture and really smart agriculture technology. So they're coming back to be farmers, and their moms are like, no. Like she's been, the mom's been typically a subsistence farmer, all their life, just barely getting enough to eat, and did everything they could for their child to go get an education so they would not have to be a farmer. And so to see them come back now in the tech ag space is just a funny leapfrog generationally in a way that is going to have to be, it's a new set of norms. And, when you can go from complete disconnection to, using your cell phone in more advanced ways than we use in commerce and otherwise, we have a swirl of change that's going on. And I think there's some benefits to be able to come in fresh and as a new economy participant.
I want to add one. In Paraguay, there's outside capital city is a community that has sprung up around the dump and the landfill. And you just can't imagine a city or a village or a town developed that their source of income comes from scavenging through the dump and the landfill. And there is a world-renowned symphony there. And it's I would say they're probably 8th grade to 12th grade. And I had the privilege of going there, and they played for us, but every instrument is made from trash. The only thing on the violins that's not trash are the strings. I mean, a saxophone made out of trash. The only thing that's not trash is the mouthpiece. Trumpets out of trash. It's unbelievable. And on the back of their wall, and this is one of John Maxwell's favorite places we stop when we're in Paraguay, and then we support their movement to get these children hope. On the back of the wall, there was the saying, and obviously a language I'm not very good at. So I leaned over and I hit John and said, "What is that?" And he goes, "Oh, wait." So John gets everybody together and says, "Now, it's a great question, y'all. Come in here close. Y'all see that up there?" "Yeah." "What is it?" He said, "The world gives us trash and we give them back music." And I thought, oh my goodness, that's fun.
Well, I think, go ahead. We'll wrap up on this question here.
Okay.
Yeah.
The idea of impact investing that you guys have spoken about seems a lot to me like the American counterpart to Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Road Initiative. Is that something you guys have taken into account when thinking about your work, or as you look at it as either a guide or competition or whatnot?
That's a fascinating question. I wish we had more time and could have a conversation around it, because yes, we're paying attention to it. And I think maybe even to widen the angle view, think about, we're in school, on campus here, think of it as typology. So that is a type of economic innovation to survive in many respects. I mean, when I worked for President Bush, he told a story about meeting the Chinese president at the time in a private moment. The Chinese president said to President Bush, "What keeps you up at night?" And President Bush, "Well, obviously the war. I mean, sending these young men and women to battle." And President Bush said, "What keeps you up at night?" He said, "How am I ever going to feed all these mouths?" So growing their economy in such a way that's self-preservation is impact of a type. And then there's influence questions and other motivations. What about in America in this, what did he lay on you, our abundance or our excess? We've gone from corporate social responsibility to ESG standards, now to impact investing. And so there's this pluralism of motivations. And I think that it's the role of the academy to poke holes and to ask tough questions and to find out what works and scale that, because it's not all equal. It's not all equal in where it comes from, what success looks like, nor its operational excellence. And so since we have this pluralism and it's scaling, we have a lot of types, it's a marketplace of ideas, and we should sort them out.
I want to give you a Jay Hein team answer that he didn't give, but I'm gonna steal it because that's this is the second time I'm giving him credit. Next time it'll be mine. All right. So, but it's when to me, if we could think about it, all the stakeholders walk away rewarded. Shareholders, consumers, employees, all the stakeholders, that 360-degree approach. If all stakeholders declare it's a winner, right? And so it goes back to, y'all are too young to remember Russian negotiations, but you had to lose for me to win. But the best deal is when both parties walk out of the room and privately go, yes, right? Because they think I got the best deal, because everyone wins, and it can be that way. So I love, and that came from his group. So next time I won't give him the credit. Give him credit twice, and third time it's yours.
Well, hey, thank you to you all for a really interesting discussion. I think a lot of follow-up discussions could occur, especially on excellent questions like that. But before we close, wanted to note a few just wrap-up announcements. One is we do have the Clemson Vladimir Matic School of Politics Endowment for any alumni that are wanting to continue to support students to be able to go abroad and really explore some of this type of critical thinking. You can find that on Clemson's webpage. And then secondly, Give Day is next
Wednesday,
which is going to have some great programming and a really great time to think about, again, for alumni, how you may want to contribute to Clemson and contribute to specific causes or faculty that you may want to honor as well. But with all that in mind, Scott and Jay, thank you so much. And Megan for excellent moderating. Let's give them a round of applause. We'll wrap on up. Thank you, each of you, for coming both in person and online.
Question about the recording.